All right, we are live. Welcome, guys. YouTube live stream. It's been a little bit. We have a pretty solid 4 game slate here to talk about. So, in the live stream, we'll just talk about some news that we are waiting for, and then it'll be Q&A live stream. So, if you guys do have any questions in the chat, just make sure to leave them in the chat. I'll try to get to everyone's questions. Be live for a good 30 minutes, but. So let's go over news so far and what we're still waiting for. So let's go ahead and refresh, make sure we're all up to date with everything here. And if you guys do enjoy these streams, just make sure to hit the like button. Really appreciate all the support as always. But so 4 games, like I said, we're getting a lot of news for Wednesday. We don't have any of the big news yet for this slate. We did get the Magic news at like 9 a.m. this morning. We got the starting lineup, so big shout out to the Magic for always giving us the info early on the starting lineups. But yeah, so the key news here: John Morant doubtful. We're not expecting him to play. That is an early game, so we will get that confirmation before lock. Some of the Pacers stuff is big with a lot of the players questionable. We saw last game. They only had 9 active players. That would boost the appeal of some of those Pacers guys. And then, like I said, we got the Magic news very, very early. Cole Anthony, Hampton, Franz, Carter, and Bamba starting. We did get the confirmation that Jalen Suggs is in fact out, and we know that CJ McCollum is playing as well. Still waiting on the Cade Cunningham news. He's questionable. We have news that Killian Hayes is available to play. So that is kind of where we're at right now. Let's see. Do we get any other news? Just more stuff flowing in here for Wednesday's slate. So... guys, happy to answer any questions. Like I said, leave them in the chat. As far as Vegas odds go, a couple games that do have some blowout risks, right? We have the Nets and the Magic. It's a 232.5 over under. The Nets are 10.5 point favorites. It is being played at Orlando, so probably a better chance that the game can at least stay competitive. The Pistons Heat game, I think, is the game that obviously has the most blowout risk, especially if Cade Cunningham can't go. The 13-point dogs currently, it's a 214.5 over under. So that game probably the ugliest on the slate. The Grizz and the Pacers right now sitting at the highest total at 235. Again, we're still waiting on some of the Pacers news, the likes of like Brogdon and Duarte and Goga Batazde and a guy like Lance Stevenson. The Grizz are currently 7-point favorites in that one on the road. And the Suns Pelicans is the late night hammer. We do, like I said, have confirmation that CJ McCollum is in fact playing. It's a 231 over under, and the Suns are 4.5-point favorites. So that game is the least blowout risk. So knowing NBA DFS, these other 3 games will go to overtime, and this game will somehow blow out. That's just, something weird like that is going to happen. But, all right, guys, I'll get to some questions now in the chat, and let's do it. Again, if you guys do enjoy the stream, just make sure to hit the like button. It does help me out a ton. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Closing in on 11.3 thousand subscribers. Anyone viable for 1K in the showdown? Let's see. So I don't have the showdown site up right now, but I would say probably not. I don't know if Biyombo would have played that last game if McGee didn't pick up 3 quick fouls in the first quarter. So let me just see. Again, I'll bring this up on my phone. 1K in the showdown slate? Probably not. No one. I wouldn't play anyone at 1K. I'm not even sure, like I said, I'm not even sure if Biyombo plays if McGee doesn't get in foul trouble. You also had Biyombo play the entire blowout, basically the fourth quarter. So be careful there with Biyombo. I think he gets a DNP unless something weird happens, the game blows out. Magic got to send out one of their dudes to the Spurs and give Magic got to send one of their dudes to the Spurs and give Pop some advice. Yeah, for sure, right? The Spurs are awful. The Thunder, I swear the Thunder are even worse. Like, sometimes we don't even get the Thunder starting lineup until after lock. Just like, okay. Or like, maybe a few minutes before lock with the Thunder starting lineup. And I talked about that in the Patreon live stream. I swear it's like outside of like SGA and Baisley for the Thunder, let's pick names out of a hat, right? It's Theo Maledon today. Oh, it's Olivier Sarr instead of Isaiah Roby in the starting lineup. I swear there's no rhyme or reason to the Thunder starting lineups. They have probably had a different starting lineup in every game or almost every single game this season. It's just picking random players and, this guy, Lindy Waters, whatever that is. Let's dust him off and throw him in the starting lineup. Like I said, I can almost guarantee you The starting lineup for the Thunder, I think they play tomorrow, will be different. It's going to be different. You're going to see some random player in there. Like, is this guy even real? But yeah, Thunder are they're known for that and getting starting lineups very late, like we got last game, right? We got news that Olivier Sarr was starting, and no one was really expecting that one. Hoping for the Nets blowout and the Miami blowout. Yeah, I mean, those two games definitely kind of teetering on the blowout. I think the Pistons game has a better chance of blowing out, especially if Katie Cunningham does not play. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what that does to the ownership, right, for, like, the spend-ups on the other side. So, like, what is that going to do to the likes of, like, KD and Kyrie or, like, Jimmy and Bam? Like, will that lower the ownership for, you know, the potential blowout risk? It's going to be interesting to see how that how ownership shakes out. Tyus Hampton, Bruce Brown, Carter, Adams, Booker, Smith, and CJ. I don't see any issues with that. I think Carter Jr. probably your safest bet in the Magic, right? He's been really consistent over the last couple weeks. He's also playing, like, mid-30s minutes. So he's probably the guy you're going to feel the best about on the Orlando Magic. You know, Jalen Smith, keep an eye on that Pacers news. I think if Goga Pataze plays, he would become a little bit riskier. But, you know, Smith is a good point per minute guy. And if we see close to 30 minutes like we did last game, I think he's going to be a pretty good option. Just got to, you know, monitor the news there with those, with a guy. I think Goga for sure would be the one that affect him the most. Fultz or Hampton? Well, point per dollar, I think it's Hampton, but straight up would be Markelle Fultz. Now, I haven't seen any confirmation. We probably won't get that, but they've been pretty strict on Markelle Fultz's minutes. Like, he's been playing basically 15 to 19 minutes every single game. So unless we hear otherwise, I don't think we see a minutes bump. But yeah, if it would be straight up, I would rather go to Fultz over Hampton. But since Hampton's almost $1,000 cheaper, I think he looks a little bit better from a salary relief perspective. Now, if you factor in ownership, I think Hampton will be a lot more popular. So, you know, Fultz probably going to be lower owned since he's a little bit more expensive. If Brogdon and Duarte are out, does Washington benefit the most? Yes. Yeah, so he's the guy looking at the biggest minutes bump, right? Because we're not going to see really – Halliburton and Buddy Hield can't really play any more than they already have been. So, like, even if Brogdon plays, you're seeing, like, 35-plus minutes from Halliburton and Hield. So they really can't get a minutes bump. And the only other guard on their team besides Washington is Kiefer Sykes, and he's kind of been limited no matter what. So – if both those guards are out and Lance Stevenson, I believe, I think Lance Stevenson's so questionable, right? Yeah, so if like those three guards are out, it's going to be Dwayne Washington that gets that big minutes bump, right? We saw it last game where Washington went from like, I think like low 20s to 34. Yeah, so he got a pretty significant minutes bump that last game. So if those guards are out for the Pacers, those questionable guys, I think Washington gets that biggest bump, and he is only 3.2K. Tyus Jones, the assist hawk, yeah. Dylan Brooks might shoot the ball 30 times. Correct. Yeah. Dylan Brooks minutes tonight, I think around 30 is a pretty fair guess. He played 26 last game. Haven't seen any confirmation on any sort of limit. I don't think he's going to all of a sudden play like 38 minutes. Played 26 in the first game, did deal with a little bit of foul trouble. I think 30 is a pretty fair guess. And with that being said, assuming John Moran is out, does feel a little bit too cheap for a black hole in Dylan Brooks, who is, like I said, he might shoot 30 times in 30 minutes. I would not be surprised about that. Favorite spend ups? It kind of depends if you think like some of the games stay competitive, right? So like I like KD if you think the Magic can keep the game competitive, but like that's kind of teetering in the blowout. I think the Miami guys look pretty good, but obviously, like I said, chance to only play 3 quarters. So it depends how you want to play it, and depends what you think happens in those middle games. If you don't want to, deal with that risk, I think the Suns spend ups looks really good. That's the one game right now that probably has the best chance of staying competitive. So again, depends on your risk tolerance, but I think those Suns guys are probably the safest. Memphis game stack, I think that's fine. Keep an eye on the Indiana news, like I said. If all those questionable players end up playing, the Pacers won't look as appealing. So it's just news that I don't think we're going to get it while we're on this stream. But if all those guys are out again, the Pacers are shorthanded. Totally fine with that. Because you got a good idea what the Pacers rotation is going to be last game if all those guys are out. It was a 9-man rotation. You didn't see a ton of run for Sykes. You saw a pretty condensed rotation. So Crowder or Najee Marshall, I think I feel a little bit better about Crowder's minutes than Najee Marshall if I had to pick. They're both secondary plays. So you're not going to go out of your way and like building out your lineups tonight. You're like, oh, I got to play Jay Crowder. Or I got to play Najee Marshall. So they're basically the same to me. Is Zire Williams viable? Sure. He's really cheap. Maybe plays a couple extra minutes. I don't think really he's getting minutes bump. I think obviously Tyus Jones, the guy that gets the biggest bump. I think Melton might get a few extra minutes. maybe a few extra minutes for Slow-Mo, who can do some ball handling. But yeah, maybe Zire Williams plays a few extra minutes. He's actually played pretty well of late in limited runs. So maybe instead of like low 20s, he goes to like mid 20s, which would make him playable. And then also a guy that I think, could be could be viable here is John Conchar. Maybe enters the rotation this game. This is a large field tournament dart throw, but Memphis does like running a somewhat deep rotation, so I don't think they would just if Ja's out, I don't think they would just condense the rotation. They would probably add someone, so Conchar probably the guy that would get added to the rotation, but would be my guess. So in a large field tournament, if you want to consider a guy like Conchar, you can. Brooks or Jaren Jackson? Yeah, it's a good question. I think, point per dollar, it's got to be Dylan Brooks, right? Because he's only 4.9 as opposed to 6.5 for Jaren Jackson. Now, with Triple J, the ceiling was there. The issue is, even in games where he hasn't been in foul trouble, still not playing huge minutes. Like, the last game we saw mid-30s minutes from him was, 2 weeks ago. So, that is a little bit concerning. I still think he could play, mid-30s minutes if they want him to. So, if you're talking about the ceiling, I do think the ceiling's higher in Jaren Jackson than it is Dylan Brooks. But, taking salary in consideration, I think Brooks looks better. Also, Brooks is pretty easy to get to since he does have that shooting guard small forward eligibility. KD or Kyrie? Another good question. I think I'll lean KD over Kyrie. I don't think either are going to be a must in the slate, and obviously you have a little bit of chance that they only play 3 quarters, but I think I would lean KD for a little or less than $1,000 over Kyrie. Campaign overpriced? I don't necessarily think he's overpriced. I've heard some things across the industry that think he's overpriced. I kind of disagree with that. I think he's priced about right, maybe even still a little bit underpriced. Only played 24 minutes in this game. It was a massive blowout. He was on pace for 40-plus fantasy points easily in that game. Played 37 minutes here against Toronto, went for 42 fantasy points. So, I think he can still get to Payne. I think, he's going to be way lower owned than Booker. So, you could take a stand and maybe hope Booker has, struggles in the field and go to a much lower owned campaign. But yeah, I don't necessarily think he's too overpriced. I think he's still in play. And I do think on a small slate, he'll be pretty low owned. So I think that's one way you could get some leverage to the field. Booker's going to be extremely popular. Maybe you go to a lower owned Payne. I think there's more risk involved because Payne's obviously going to be way less owned. And Booker has a pretty high ceiling. But I don't think Cameron Payne's out of play. Favorite play for Miami? Another good question. I don't know if I have one. I'll say Bam. I'll say Bam at 8-2. A little bit cheaper than Jimmy. Front court matchup against Stewart or Bagley or Kelly Olynyk. That's a really good spot for Bam. So I'll say Bam. But I don't really know what to do with Miami, right? Because you have basically a fully healthy team in a great matchup, but also a pretty good chance they only play 3 quarters. So I'm kind of torn at what I want to do with Miami. But I think I'll say Bam in that situation. So do they have Memphis prize picks up yet? I was waiting to see what Tyus Jones would be at. So they have a taco for Kyrie Irving. Let's see. Do they have anything for... Okay, so they have Jones at 6.5 assists. Probably would lean that over. Let's see. What do they have him on his fantasy points? That being Tyus Jones. Or do they don't have him up? I mean, I kind of like the over on Cameron Payne at 31 fantasy points. Like I said, I think he's going overlooked by the industry. I don't think he's like a slam play. I don't think he's, a core play on the slate. But here's the facts, right? Devin Booker is going to be chalk. He's going to be very popular. A lot of the field is going to have him. It's a great matchup. That's one game you're going to feel pretty confident the game's staying close. Well, Devin Booker has a floor, right? He can struggle from the field. And if he struggles, what's going to happen? Probably Campaign is going to excel. If Booker's struggling, you're probably seeing a pretty good game from Campaign unless they get absolutely destroyed, which I don't think happens. So, I guess Campaign is the flag that I'm planting on this slate. I think he's a pretty good low on play. And yeah, I didn't see anything else on Tyus. I think they only have his assists up. Oh, they have points, rebounds, assists at 24.5. We'd have to do some more digging on that one. So I don't know if I could, fire that off without looking into more numbers when Ja was out. But I think, 6.5 assists, I think he could still get that because I think we do get like close to 30 minutes of Tyus Jones, maybe a little bit more. I mean, he's got 6 assists, like 20 minutes. I don't know. It feels like a pretty sharp line, but yeah. All right, back to DraftKings. So let's see. Thoughts on, okay, where are we at? Okay, we want to prize picks. Thoughts on Triple J. I think he's a viable tournament play. I think, you're going to see some other Memphis guys get more ownership, but he still is a guy that has a ceiling. He's a frustrating play in DFS. You're going to, probably lose a lot of hair playing Triple J over the year, but again, he's got a 40-plus fantasy point ceiling. So, yeah, Ayton for low ownership. I think Ayton looks pretty good. I don't know if he's going to be low owned. I think Ayton will get some ownership. He's low 7K in a good matchup, so I like Ayton. I just don't think he's going to be that low owned. Stars and scrubs build. I mean, what are we considering the star? You only have like a couple guys over 10K, so I guess it's technically more of like a balanced build since there's just not that many stars in this slate. There's only 4 games. Any game to stack? Yeah, I think the first game and the last game look appealing to stack. The first game obviously waiting on the Pacers news, but those are the 2 games you're going to feel the best about staying competitive. So, if you're stacking up a game, I think those 2 games do make some sense. Anytime Triple J looks good, he'll get into foul trouble. Yeah, so like the times I want to play Jaren Jackson Jr. are when he's low owned. Tonight, on a 4-game slate without John Morant, I do think he gets some ownership. So we'll see. How much foul trouble risk do you see Triple J being in? I mean, he's always in foul trouble risk. But like any single game doesn't matter the matchup. So, yeah, like I think going to a guy like Brandon Clark could make some sense in the slate, right? He's a guy that he can play some backup 4 and backup 5. So, like minutes wise for Brandon Clark, I would assume we probably get at least 20 minutes from him. He's going to be a good point per minute guy. This is a great matchup. If you get like foul trouble from Jaren Jackson or Adams, or even if this game blows out, he could get extended a bit. So I think Clark stands out as a pretty good value. Point guard is stacked today. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good point guard plays. The good thing is you have a lot of guys that are shooting guard eligible too. So like Booker, CJ Halliburton, all have that shooting guard eligibility. But yeah, so like Tyus Jones, obviously campaign. I kind of like his lower own play. We'll see. But yeah, I think there's a lot of solid plays at the point guard position. And that's not really a surprise. Usually point guard and center are the best positions to target, the best spots to go to in the utility spot. Favorite game to stack tonight? Yeah, it depends on the Pacers news. If all those Pacers guys are out, I'm going to say the first game. If those Pacers guys are in, I'll say the last game as far as games to stack. Do you feel like Jokic is better than Embiid? Or does he have to do more on a weaker team? I'll just say this. If I had to vote for an MVP today, it would be Jokic. Drummond or Adams? Good question. I think the ceiling's higher on Drummond. I think Adams is a little bit safer. With Steven Adams, he's probably not going to kill you. He kind of have a ceiling too. Like Adams does have a ceiling when Jaren Jackson gets in foul trouble, right? We've seen that in games that Jaren Jackson's gotten in foul trouble. You've seen some pretty big games from Adams, but I think that I would go Adams is the more safer play because he's probably going to get at least mid-20s minutes, potentially more if Jackson gets in some foul trouble. Whereas Drummond's minutes are not as secure. But he does have a pretty high ceiling. So like if Drummond played like 28 minutes tonight, he would probably be in the winning lineup. So I think Adams is your safer bet. Still has a ceiling too. I think Drummond does have a little more upside though. Thoughts on playing KD and Kyrie together? It's suboptimal for sure. I think if I'm doing that, I'm stacking the game up and hoping something weird happens. So like do that, maybe hope like the first or the last game blow out. So like sure, like if I'm playing Kyrie and KD together, which is viable on a small slate, weird things can happen. What I'm probably going to do is run it back to either like Cole Anthony or Carter Jr. and just stack that game up. Hope it shoots out. Hope it gets to overtime. So it's possible, but yeah, I would full stack it if I'm going that route. Dragic of no Seth Curry. So I think Dragic is a fair value play. I think he plays low to mid-20s minutes. If there's no Seth Curry, maybe mid-20s. I do think Patty Mills probably gets that minutes bump if Seth Curry misses. So, yeah, we'll see what the Nets do with the starting lineup there. Kyrie or Booker? I mean, I think Booker looks a little bit better straight up. I do think Booker will get more ownership, as we talked about. 27 and 9 assists when Ja was out last. Yeah, again. Is that being Tyus Jones, you mean? Tyus Jones has a ceiling. Now, again, we do have Dylan Brooks back. So they're basically a fully healthy team outside of Ja. I think the last game Ja missed, Brooks was definitely still out. Maybe one other player was out too for Memphis. So this is basically a fully healthy team outside of Ja. Thoughts on CJ? I think he's a pretty solid spend up. He's been playing extremely well. I think that, he's probably not going to as much ownership as some of those Suns guys, but still think that 9.4K price is a fair price for CJ. Brogdon or Payne if Brogdon plays. Depends what the rest of your lineup looks like, right? If you already have Booker, then I think you go Brogdon. If you're fading Booker, I think you go Payne. So a little bit hard to say just straight up because you need to see whether, are you playing Booker? Are you playing some of these other Suns? Because, if you're playing Booker, then I think it makes a little more sense to go to a guy like Brogdon. If Katie's out who benefits the most of the Pistons, I think it's probably Killian Hayes. Look, we've already been seeing some pretty big minutes for Corey Joseph, but I would think that Killian Hayes moves into the starting lineup. You would also see probably more usage for the likes of like Jeremy Grant, Sadiq Bey. Obviously increases the chance of the blowout, though. Crowder and Craig or Alvarado McGee. Oh. Yeah. Jose Alvarado with CJ McCollum back. Probably like mid-teens minutes. I think the first option is safer, but my feelings on McGee. We went over that. Popeyes or KFC? Honestly, not a big fan of either. I think both are pretty easy fade if you're going fast food. Pelicans value is too overpriced now. Yeah, a lot of guys definitely got a price bump with CJ out. Now you got CJ McCollum in, and McCollum's going to dominate the usage, right? We saw, what was the game? It was a couple of games ago where McCollum literally did everything. I think it was against Memphis, so they got destroyed. And like no one else was doing anything, and McCollum was just going off. He went for 60 fancy points in 3 quarters. So I agree. I think a lot of those Pelicans guys are overpriced with McCollum back. I think Bruce Brown's a fair play. He's been playing extremely well of late. I don't know if he continues to play this well, but he also played pretty big minutes last game, 41. Now we do have Kyrie back. So I would think those minutes tick down to maybe around 30. But yeah, it's hard to argue. I mean, he's played extremely well. Crazy that he was out of the rotation to begin the year, right? They were playing guys like Javon Carter over Bruce Brown at the beginning of the year. Remember Bruce Brown? I think it was the first slate. Bruce Brown was like a pretty popular value play on the first NBA slate of the regular season, and he just got a DNP. Ayton or Carter Jr.? Ayton or Carter Jr. is a good question. I'd probably lean to DeAndre Ayton. Okay, so all those Pacers guys are in. Okay, so we just got that news. So yeah, then the Pacers guys are a little bit harder to get to. Not saying they're completely out of play, but that news does make them trickier to get to with everyone. So yeah, Goga's still game time decision. So I would say if Goga's out, you could still get to the likes of like Isaiah Jackson and Jalen Smith. I think those two guys would still be in play if Goga's out. But yeah, Stevenson is in, Duarte is in, and Brogdon is in. So really hard to get to those value guards now for the Pacers. I think Dwayne Washington probably out of play. I think a guy like O'Shea Brissett, even though he's not really a guard, probably loses a couple extra minutes because you're most likely going to get Brogdon starting alongside Halliburton and Hield. They're probably going to start Brogdon, Halliburton, Hield, O'Shea Brissett, and Jackson is probably who they're going to start. Oh, I'm going crazy. I thought that said Markelle Fultz signed a 2-year contract with the Celtics. I'm like, what's going on here? Malik Fitz, just MF. Looked like Markelle Fultz when I first looked at it. I was like, wait, what is going on? Yeah, that Pacers news is pretty big, right? So definitely does downgrade a lot of those Pacers. Keep an eye on Goga news. That is still going to be significant, though. Thanks, TK. Get those likes up. Why no? Fantasy content weekends. What do you mean? Don't diss Javon, DK. He wasn't used properly. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Javon's a terrible player, but I do think Bruce Brown is better than Javon Carter. Yeah, they were playing David Duke. Curry's out and Cam Thomas is out. Okay, so hey, we're getting some news. This is actually kind of surprising. Slate does a lock for another hour and a half, and we're actually getting some news. But yeah, so Cam Thomas and Seth Curry out. So let's talk about that. So starting lineup is going to be Kyrie, KD, Drummond, Bruce Brown, probably Patty Mills or Dragic. But that does make this rotation's probably going to be pretty tight, right? So I think this is pretty important to talk about. So last game for the Nets, right? They were shorthanded. Whoops. So the last game for the Nets, they basically ran a 7-man rotation. So KD started, played 43 minutes. Bruce Brown started, played 41. Drummond played 27. Dragic played 38 minutes. Patty Mills played 31. James Johnson played 31 off the bench. Claxton played 21. You had Cam Thomas play 8. Well, now basically what's happening is you have Kyrie playing and those other guys. Cam Thomas is out, but he only played 8 minutes. So I think we get an 8-man rotation tonight of starting lineup. Most likely going to be Kyrie at the 1, Patty Mills at the 2, Bruce Brown at the 3, KD at the 4, Drummond at the 5, with Dragic playing the backup point, Claxton playing the backup 5, and James Johnson can, back up a couple different positions. So I think that's going to be, your 8-man rotation tonight. Maybe they dust off Kessler Edwards for a few minutes, but I do think the Nets are going to run a pretty tight rotation in this game. So it does make some of those value guys intriguing. Yeah, Jalen Smith. Yeah, so Smith he was already getting consistent minutes, kind of even when Gogo's out. It's like he's pretty consistently played mid to high 20s minutes every single game. So I don't think, even if Goga plays, you can still get to him. I would feel a little bit better about his minutes if Goga's out. But like him, and even a guy like Isaiah Jackson, I think would be pretty solid. So those two, I think, are still in play for the Pacers if Goga plays, but they're going to be like a little bit riskier. The positive with both those guys is they're going to be productive when they're on the court. Like they are. So no, what's up, man? Dragic looks great now. Yeah, I think Dragic looks pretty good. Dragic's going to be pretty productive when he's on the court. He's cheap too, so. Yeah, we went over that. I think over on campaign fantasy points 31 looks pretty good to me. That's the one that stood out just from a first glance. Patty Mills tonight. I mean, he's fine. It's Patty Mills. He's definitely taking a backseat usage wise. But if he starts, I would think he probably plays at least 25 minutes. He's going to be scoring dependent, right? He's not going to do much of the ball handling. So, Patty Mills getting fantasy points is going to come down to him hitting his shots. But I do think he'll have some opportunities, especially if they run like an 8-man rotation, which I think they will. So, yeah, I think Patty Mills is definitely a viable value option. Bruce Brown or Wagner? Bruce Brown, yeah. And we're talking about Franz Wagner, right? Not Mo Wagner. Because I do think Mo Wagner is like still in play in a large field tournament. But, yeah, Franz Wagner at 5'3". Kind of taking a back seat recently. Last 4 games, 9, 26, 21, and 19 fantasy points. So I think you're going to feel a little bit better about Bruce Brown. I also feel probably a little bit better about his minutes now, too. Yeah, I don't hate playing Kyrie. Obviously, it's a great matchup. Like I said, with Kyrie and KD, it's the Nets are one of the better matchups for the NBA. But you got to factor in, there's a chance they only play 3 quarters. That is a possibility. Play Cade or fade. Well, we got to make sure Cade's even going to play. If he does play, sure. I think you can go to him as a contrarian play. He's playing massive minutes right now because I have not been playing him. Whenever I play Cade Cunningham, he plays like 28 minutes because he's in massive foul trouble. But, Cade, over the last few games, he's averaging like 40 minutes a game. You follow him out, March Madness too. So I'm going to be, entering a bracket probably. I'll probably enter, make a few bets as well. But I really have not had much time to follow college basketball this year, so definitely not an expert in that category. Kyrie will outscore KD tonight. You're talking about fantasy points? Possible for sure, yeah. Favorite center in tonight's slate. What price range? So let's just talk about the center position. So, like, of the guys at the top, I think, Ayton's probably your safest bet, right? Because you have Jonas Valanciunas, probably feels a little bit overpriced. You have Bam Adebayo. I love the spot, but, a little bit of blowout risk there. Carter Jr. looks okay, but again, a little bit of blowout risk. So, Ayton, probably your safest bet. I'm probably seeing 30 to 32 minutes in a good matchup. So, he looks pretty safe. I think Adams is a relatively safe play as well. And then you have more of those risky options. So, Andre Drummond, kind of a boomer bust, but the ceiling's pretty high on him. The Indiana guys, I don't think are bad options, especially if Goga's out. Now, if Goga Batadze plays, he's only 3.4K. So, like, that would feel a little bit too cheap for Goga, right? Because the last 3 games he's played, 24, 18, and 20 minutes, even if he doesn't start, I think that would make him playable. So, I think if you're just looking at it first glance, like, what's the most optimal, best play? Probably DeAndre Ayton. Bay if no Cade. Yeah, so, like, if you're playing for that competitive game for Detroit, I think you can look to Bay and Grant. So, like, if you're targeting, for example, if you're going to play like Jimmy or Bam, then I think it would make some sense to get to one of these wings. Because if there's no Cade Cunningham, you're going to see more usage for Sadiq Bey and Jeremy Grant, right? We saw some pretty big games from Sadiq Bey when Cade was out earlier in the year. So I think you could play for that. And then maybe look to a guy like Killian Hayes, who, if there's no limitations, I think would be a fair value play, assuming he would move in the starting lineup. But I think he would. I think the starting lineup would be Killian Hayes, Corey Joseph, Grant, Bey, and Stewart, right? I think that would be the rotation if Cade Cunningham is out. Glad to be back, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, of course. Good to be doing these YouTube live streams. Now, again, I won't be doing these every day, but if you guys enjoy these, I'll be happy to do these a few times a week for sure. Okay, well, it's been a little over 30 minutes now, so any last minute questions, guys? Otherwise, I'll let you go. But yeah, 4-game slate. I think it's a pretty good slate overall. Still waiting on Cade Cunningham news is now the big one since I got the Pacers news. Anything else? All right, I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to end it on that. Again, appreciate all you guys coming to check out the live stream. Good luck tonight, and I will see you all in the next one.